Hello and welcome to session 306 in the AISafety.com reading group. Tonight we will be discussing The Sun is Big, but Superintelligences Will Not Spare Earth a Little Sunlight by Eliezer Yudkowsky. Eliezer Yudkowsky is the senior researcher at the Machine Intelligence Research Institute, and this is partially written as a response to a series of tweets by Kelvin A. Santos, the CEO of _Futaki. So these Twitter threads were turned into a less wrong post 2 months ago at the end of September. The Kelvin describes himself as building markets for positive technological singularity, and I will in this probably go with the assumption that he is an effective accelerationist, the organization that sometimes calls itself, or the movement that calls itself E/ACC. He doesn't explicitly write this on his Twitter bio, but like the previous tweet he has was a retweet of Mark Andreessen, and just a few days earlier he had tweeted a kind of manifesto that very strongly overlaps with the effective accelerationists movement. So I think it's probably fair that he is like at least very, very adjacent to that. Now, what is effective accelerationism? It is a way to go from an Earth that looks like this to an Earth that looks like this. This is a movement where I probably need to state up front that I do have very substantial reservations about this. I will try not to be too biased, but I will probably at some point fail, and I apologize for that. Wikipedia has a description of accelerationism in general. It's written here on the screen. The way that I think about it is that accelerationism is the idea that the world naturally trends towards some kind of end state, and the only thing the accelerationists have to do is to remove impediments from the natural order of things. Very often this takes the form of antisocial acts. In particular, there's no injunction against violence, meaning that accelerationism has often been associated with terrorism. Like the Wikipedia article is like mostly half of this kind of thing, which is a very big difference from the rationalist community. Effective accelerationism is a subset of this accelerationism movement. And it can be summarized by the attempt to obtain technological progress at all costs. And as we'll see, if you want something on at any cost, then you might need to pay a very, very steep price to obtain this, including basically losing everything else. It is, in fact, not very trivial to figure out what does the effective accelerationism movement try to do. I've tried to read some of what they are writing, and I think one of the core tenets is that they are welcoming that humanity becomes replaced to more or less with artificial intelligence, because it is hoped that this artificial intelligence can create a huge amount of value, and this overshadows basically both the risk that this will go wrong and what value humanity could produce in an unaugmented state. One thing in particular that this also means is that the accelerationist part of removing impediments has cashed out in practice to things like the very, very dishonest opposition to the SB 1047 bill. And probably also a lot of other things, including obviously a lot of posts on Twitter. The key the key intellectual figure behind the effective accelerationists is Guillaume Verdon, who previously tweeted under the pseudonym Based Jeff Bezos. And I've tried to, he's kind of like the leader in some sense. I've tried to read some of his writings, and I haven't been able to really strongly extract a coherent core from this. This is a trait that a lot of accelerationists share. Many people have read, for instance, Nick Land, and concluded that there might not in fact be any coherent core behind all the verbiage. There are also other reasons why we would expect this to be the case. For instance, the core claim that humanity should be replaced is one that the vast majority of people disagree with very strongly. And for political reasons, there are you might not want to state that very loud and very upfront. Another reason is legal, that both some of the things that they are doing and some of the things that they are trying to obtain can involve things that are very much not legal. In the most extreme case, omnicide is very, very much illegal, and taking action towards that is probably something that could land people in substantial hot water. However, for our cases, the thing that is most relevant to us is that the effective accelerationism movement is not arguing for making strong claims of safety or even strong claims of certainty. This is opposed most directly by Eliezer Yudkowsky from the Machine Intelligence Research Institute, who is arguing that if we just try to have technological progress and nothing else, we will end up with what is popularly called a paperclipper, a paperclip maximizer. Eliezer Yudkowsky would say this in a more technical way, but that's basically something that would in fact destroy all value. So the way this debate looks like in practice is very much through some Twitter engagements, where someone, for instance, makes a comment that they are observing that some of the things that Eliezer Yudkowsky predicted, here instrumental convergence, seems to be happening in reality, and Kelvin Sanders makes a reply to this, saying, basically accepting the point, but saying that there are a few things that Eliezer Yudkowsky predicted that has not come to pass. In this case, some kind of lumpiness in research or some very strong coordination. This isn't precisely what Eliezer Yudkowsky formulated this, but it's like kind of close. And he believes that this is not a thing that's going to happen. He believes that we could have very powerful agents in a competitive scenario, and these agents can be misaligned. And Eliezer Yudkowsky replies to this, basically saying, no, if you try to have many very, very powerful AIs, then and they don't care about humans, then humans get like eaten or smashed underfoot or something like that. In fact, Eliezer Yudkowsky probably didn't read Kelvin's tweet perfectly, because Kelvin is just saying that you can have misalignment and very powerful agents in a competitive world. And he doesn't in fact say that you can also have humans and human flourishing at the same time. So now I will try to go through some of Kelvin's arguments for why we shouldn't expect doom or something like that, a world that doesn't reflect anything that we will find valuable. It's an argument that has a lot of hedging and a lot of use of the words may, that this thing may happen, and I've tried to remove most of them from the argument. So the first assumption is that we will have some kind of competitive scenario, meaning that the superintelligences will to some extent not be able to cooperate. And I think this is a plausible thing that could happen. We have some reasonably strong theoretical reasons why very intelligent and very rational agents ought to be able to cooperate, but these theorems also predict that humans ought to be better at cooperating than they actually are. So a very competitive future may in fact be in store for us, even though I consider it somewhat unlikely. So if we have a competitive situation, then probably the AIs won't be able to bide their time very much if they see some kind of advantage, because they will be able to, someone else will exploit that first. So this means, for instance, instead of the AIs just deceiving us for a very long time until they're powerful enough to just cleanly take over everything, there will be some earlier, smaller, more messy attempts at taking over the world. And this is claimed that this will cause large but finite damages. And as Svimosowicz says, please speak directly into the microphone, because like the large damages that can happen for things like wars are in fact very, very large. And there is a very clear legal problem here in that if Kelvin is trying to assist something that could potentially cause what he considers large damages, then it's not a legal defense that the damages are finite. So this is a place where you need to be careful what you write on Twitter, because what you write on Twitter can have actual consequences, actual legal consequences. So the argument from here goes that if we assume that the world can somehow be cleanly divided into AIs and humans, then as the AIs become stronger and stronger, then they will eventually get to dominate. But the argument is that we may in fact not see this. We might see a continuum of intelligences from the human level up to the superintelligent that are roughly continuous on the relevant strategic dimensions. So in order to evaluate this argument, we can use modus ponens, which means that we need to both establish that we are going to see this kind of continuity, and if we see this kind of continuity, then human values will to some extent be preserved. So the first question is, will we have some kind of continuity? And on an intuitive sense, this seems very doubtful. Like if we compare something like GPT-4 to me, then it seems that there are some areas where the intelligences are like kind of close in some sense, but also they're just very different. There's a lot of things that GPT-4 can do dramatically better, and also something is dramatically worse. And for many strategic purposes, GPT-4 is just very, very different from me. So if we assume that we will have something like a continuum between AIs and humans all the way up to the superintelligent level, will that buy any safety? The classic answer from Eliezer Yudkowsky is no, that coordination schemes between superintelligences are just something that humans cannot participate in. And Kelvin's argument here is that if we, instead of just having superintelligences, have a continuum of AIs, then a lot of different coalitions become possible, and some of these might include humans. One of the reasons why this would happen would be that the advantage of the superintelligences are much smaller. And I think here Kelvin is conflating two things. That in a continuum, obviously, the superintelligences would have a low advantage over the things that are almost as clever, like almost super intelligent. That seems very, very likely, but it doesn't follow that the absolute distance between the superintelligences and humans is small. In the same sense that you can imagine that there are many animals right now, so there is kind of a continuum in intelligence from ants to humans, but that doesn't imply that the difference in intelligence is small. Another reason why this continuity would, in Kelvin's model, make things safer is that the improvement processes would not be like very limited to a single agent, but be spread out among many more agents, and that is something that, in theory, ought to be safer. And I can see the argument. I can see that. Oh no, sorry, I was getting ahead of myself here. Kelvin is arguing here that in order for the superintelligences to preserve human value, it is just a requirement that some of the intelligences that are less than superintelligences are are somewhat aligned or care about human values to some extent. And I think this is wrong. The question is whether the winning coalition of AIs care about humans. Because if we imagine a continuity from ants to humans, then even though there are less smart humans involved in the winning coalition, that doesn't mean that ants are represented at all. Finally, we get to the question of whether there are whether more diverse AIs and more diverse improvement processes are safer. And I think it's fair and reasonable to expect that this will in fact be the case. Like there's a larger probability that these AIs will be somewhat aligned if there are many compared to if there is just one. But it is not a very great hope in my view, because we shouldn't expect that like, for instance, all the large language models that we see right now are roughly identical. Like, there's obviously a difference between GPT-4 and Claude, but they are much more alike than they are like humans. The next part of the argument relies on the question of free energy, where Eliezer is arguing that the number of superintelligences doesn't matter very much compared to like their total energy output, because if they build factories that produce enough heat to warm up the Earth substantially, then it doesn't really matter if there's 1 or 20. If the temperature rises enough, then we die, basically. And Charles is making the counter-argument that if space access is really easy and cheap, then the AIs will just go there instead of heating up the Earth. And he's using the concept of Gibbs free energy, which was created by the physicist Joshua Gibbs. It's the kind of free energy that people normally think that you can use to do useful work. But it's important to distinguish this from the kind of free energy that we normally talk about in AI safety. In AI safety, when we talk about free energy, we talk about the unoptimized parts of the current civilization that a hypothetical superintelligence would be able to exploit. This is things like, right now, the IT systems that we have are secured by, by humans, and that means a superintelligence could hack into basically all of them. Whereas if we had a continuity of intelligences, presumably we could use some of those to improve our resilience towards that kind of thing. There are other ways, like right now, if there was a superintelligence, it could persuade us of very many things that it probably wouldn't be able to do in a world where there have previously been superintelligences both on the offense and defense. So this is the overall argument that Eliezer Yudkowsky sums up as, like, the solar system is big, so probably Earth would be left alone. And Eliezer, so this is his summary of this. I'm not entirely sure that's actually what Charles means. It's possible that Charles is just, he seems to be confused about what alignment means. But I think Eliezer, probably there are a number of people who believe that since the solar system is big, surely it will be able to spare a bit for Earth. And Eliezer Yudkowsky uses the analogy of a rich person. Because right now there exists rich person, people who are just extremely rich compared to us, and you can like literally go and ask the richest man in the world, hey, can I have $100? And he will very predictably say no. And this situation Eliezer posits is kind of analogous to if we later want to ask a superintelligence for a bit of sunlight for Earth. Zach M. Davis is objecting to this, saying that, hey, the rich people actually do give to charity. And I think, of course, they do give to charity, but they very much give to charities for their own reasons, for like signaling reasons to other people that they care about. And they don't give to you, and they don't give to you because you ask nicely. Brendan Long is saying that perhaps the reason why they don't give is because, like, if they gave to everyone, then they wouldn't have enough money. And that is, of course, an asymmetry, but it still requires that they care about everyone, because, like, he could also give money to, like, all the Beatles in the world or something like that, but probably the richest man in the world doesn't care about Beatles. So what do rich people in fact care about? Like, if you imagine that they care about basically random things, then our chances of getting anything from that seems very small. Like, if you just throw money at random things, the probability that it will hit humans is in fact very, very low. Scott Alexander objects to this, saying that we are in fact not random in the sense that we are asking to retain something that we already have, and that is a different kind of ask. And it obviously is a different kind of ask. And for rich people in particular, they care very much about property rights. So that means that rich people will probably pay a substantial amount to ensure that property rights are respected in the future. And that's something that is true for rich people and probably are not true for superintelligences after a takeover. But I agree that this is a substantial argument against the validity of this analogy. Okay, so we could imagine that we could instead trade with this superintelligence, trade for some sunlight in some sense. And here again I should say that I'm sorry that the debate becomes somewhat acrimonious and people use not so nice language to refer to each other. It would be nicer if people talk nicely to each other. I know I'm not perfect, but we should strive to this. So Ilya Svitkowski is saying that the laws of comparative advantage seem like they would imply that we would be able to trade with a superintelligence, but this has the underlying assumption that our atoms are in fact configured in the way that is most optimal to provide what the superintelligence wants through an exchange of our labor instead of some other way. And that in fact seems very, very implausible. Alexei Turchin answers that by trading fairly with us, a superintelligence would be able to signal to other superintelligences that it is in fact trustworthy. And while this is true, probably before some kind of takeover, I think that the establishment of a singleton is very, very strongly overdetermined by the eventual incentives, and from that point, probably this kind of thing, consideration will not matter. Another objection is raised by Richard Ngo, who says that actually humans have a special place in the ontology of the eventual superintelligence, because even if there is one superintelligence that built another even better, that builds an even better superintelligence, then we were the ones who were responsible for moving it from the biological level to the level of electronics. And that ought to count for something, and that might mean that there's a reason for it to care about us. Warren has an answer to this, looking at the entire level of both previous and later ancestors that a superintelligence would be able to claim. I can't really do Warren's answer justice at this point, but I would say, in fact, that there is a sense that Richard Ngo is privileging the hypothesis that just because he was the one who personally put the smiley face on the Shoggoth, then he would be the one that would be spared. That seems very unlikely. Another argument he makes at a different place in the thread is a comparison to national parks. We seem to put quite a bit of effort into saving those. And I agree we do, but this is because they relate strongly to our values and not because these national parks ask us in a meaningful sense. Ilya Svitkowski tries a different rhetorical kind of innovation for explaining this, using the concept of going hard, like trying to really reach a goal, in the sense that there are some humans who push through boundaries and are really uncompromising in trying to achieve their goals. And humanity as a whole is able to put a man on the moon and do like really impressive things. Another example would be something like Stockfish, which tries really, really hard to win. And even though it's 99.99999% sure it will win, it still tries really, really hard. So this is an attempt to not say like a consequentialist maximizer, but trying to explain this in a different way. And I mean, for a Twitter thread, that seems reasonable. So we imagine in the future that a superintelligence is building a Dyson sphere, and the Earth asks if it could spare a bit of sunlight. And Eliezer says that no, we will get a superintelligence that goes hard and that eats all the sunlight, not just some of that. And it's a reasonable question to ask, why do we expect that? And there's a shallow answer that says that OpenAI is trying to build AIs that go hard, and the AIs that they're building right now seem to go hard. And sorry, the reason for this is that we're using basically reinforcement learning that by default results in algorithms, entities, intelligences that goes hard. The difficult thing is not to build something that goes hard, but building something that satisfies us to some extent. There are, in fact, some actual deep underlying reasons that Eliezer Yudkowsky alludes to, and he describes them here. I will, in fact, not go through this because Eliezer Yudkowsky says that we shouldn't focus on this. We should not focus on the deep underlying reasons when we have these kind of shallow arguments, because if you have an argument that refutes the deep, then they also refutes the shallow. Whether this is in fact a good way to look at this, I notice I am substantially confused about. And maybe that's a reason why you shouldn't have this kind of shallow debates on Twitter, but I am confused about whether this is a good idea. Certainly people object. Zach says that, yeah, this may be an example of someone who is presenting like bad arguments, but there are other places where other people have like written stronger arguments. And he suggests that Eliezer Yudkowsky replies to one of these posts. Eliezer Yudkowsky says, like, fair enough, you might need different posts to explain things to different things. In particular, the one that Zach points to is one that Nate Suarez has already answered. There is a sad thing about the state of debate in AI safety, where everybody have different objections, different views on how things could be safe and how they could not be safe, and it's very, very hard to figure out what are the actual crucial considerations. Like literally after Zach has in this post, in this comment, given stated that this is just a straw man and no one believes this, Matthew Barnett replies to this and says, actually he believes this. And so people just have very, very dramatic different reasons for thinking that AI is safe, and have very different models and have many different things that they think are important. So it is just a really hard area to get any kind of clarity of. We do, in fact, however, get some kind of synthesis from this discussion, because Kelvin sees Eliezer Yudkowsky's answer and makes a reply to that, which is really nice. And it's also a nice reply in the sense that there's a synthesis, because Kelvin basically agrees with 90% of Eliezer's description of this. He doesn't say which 90%, but I think the 90% are probably mostly on the actual predictions, less than on the moral value. And in particular, he agrees that strong underlying superintelligences would in fact probably destroy all natural human habitat. The place where he disagrees with Eliezer is the end statement of his Twitter thread, which is that this is okay.
I can't hear Søren at the moment.